Hello Nigerians and welcome to another edition of Politics is Life. My name is Yetunde Makinde. Today on the program, I'll be continuing the series where I've been discussing the content of my book. I've done, I think, 3 episodes already, and this will make the final one as I'll be discussing the final chapter, chapter 7. Chapter 7 is sectionalized into 8 parts, and like I've done with the previous episodes, I'll discuss each of these sections very quickly. 7.1 is titled A Hard Restart. What I did here was to present the case that Nigeria is in need of a hard restart. Even though Nigerians at home and in the diaspora disagree on a lot of things, one thing, however, we all agree upon is that Nigeria is in need of a hard restart. That nothing short of a hard restart can bring about the much needed change that we all crave, that we all want, that we all desire, and I would even say that we deserve. The socio-economic challenges that confront us won't be resolved or go away until we hit the reset button or we hit the restart button. Socio-economic challenges, security challenges, infrastructural deficit, food insecurity, and the list goes on. So that was the bulk of the presentation or the argument in 7.1. In 7.12, which is a subsection of 7.1, I made a case for leadership, and so I titled that section Leadership, the X Factor, the Case for Yugoslavia. When I was growing up, Yugoslavia was a country, but around 1990, that's about a decade after the demise of Josip Broz Tito. Tito is his nickname, who was the Croatian Yugoslavian president. Around the 10th anniversary of his passing, things really began to get choppy and politically charged in Yugoslavia. And in no time, everything just went south. And today, Yugoslavia is no more. What I did with that section, like I said, was to make a case for leadership, to show what astute leadership can wrought or achieve. It's rather sad and unfortunate that a lot of people don't seem to understand that political leadership is has its own fundamental requirement, that there are requisite skill set that are necessary for political leadership. People somehow conflate leaders with managers, which is why I believe some people argue that just about anyone can lead a country. I've heard I've heard this in circles where you would expect people to know better. We can't allow governance, public sector governance, we can't allow it to go to just about anyone. Countries have to be led by individuals who have the requisite competence for the job. Political leadership is a big responsibility. It therefore means the responsibility must be assigned to those who are well equipped for it. I belong to the school of thought that says that leaders are born and not made, but somehow some people think that leaders can be, that just about anyone, like I've said, just about anyone can be leaders, or just about anyone can govern, because they're conflating leadership with managerial role. They're conflating leadership role with managerial roles. They don't understand the distinction between individuals who have the affinity for leadership, people who are born to lead. Because let's face it, there are those who are born to lead. Why are they born to lead? Because they have the requisite competence for leadership. You can make managers, you can't make leaders, because there are certain character traits that a true leader must possess. And some of these things I discussed in 7.12. And I used Tito as the exemplary, I used Tito to demonstrate exemplary leadership, what leadership can wrought achieve. Leaders are able to do extraordinary things. Managers don't do that. Even if we look at it from the standpoint of what we were taught in management, managers, you tell managers what to do and they will carry out your orders brilliantly. They have a policy they work with and they can work with it and deliver. Leaders are creative, are innovative, are resourceful, they have integrity, of course, they're honest, yes, all of that we were taught. But a leader is the kind of person who is able to think on his feet, is able to come up with solutions to problems. Managers don't do that. Managers probably have to go and check the book, have to go and read the policy. But because leaders are creative, they're able to come up with solutions, spur of the moment, right on their feet. They're able to come up, they see the bigger picture. Which is why like I said, belong to the school of thought that says leaders are born and not made. People who have the affinity for leadership have that in them as a talent. You don't make talent. You can hone talent. You can make your talent shine. And if you don't own your talent, if you don't do anything with your talent, then of course you can't, then the talent is no use to you, is useless, all right? Because you're not able to put your talent to good use if you don't hone it. But you first must possess the talent. It's just like any other field of human endeavor. Football, music, artistic endeavors. The talent for you to be a great or brilliant artist or a great footballer, the talent must be inherent. We don't learn talent. Talents are born. We all are born with different talent. We all are born with different talents, and then it's up to us to hone the skill so that our talent can shine through. So that's what I did essentially with 7.12. And then moving on now to 7.2, which I captioned Nigeria, the vessel without a rudder. What I did here essentially was to show that Nigeria is going in the direction that is not healthy for it, that the path Nigeria is toward in the last 40 years, 4 to 5 decades, is not a healthy one, and it shouldn't be so, because there's so many of us, and as a result talents abound here, but unfortunately much of this talent basically goes to waste because many of us don't get the opportunity to be able to put our talents to good use. So I just basically used the analogy of a vessel to, when a vessel has no direction, what happens to it on the high sea is what I did there. It's a very small section, it's probably the shortest section in the book. And the reason for that is because, excuse me. The reason for that is because that particular caption, Nigeria, the vessel without a rudder, was the title of the article that I was writing, or that I was going to write to use to drive traffic to another website that I had at the time. I had my plans, my muse had another. I was going to do that article, and it sooner dawned on me that I had a book in the making. So instead of an article, I ended up with a book. So I didn't want that caption to go to waste, and it still had, I didn't want it to go to waste. I just thought to insert it in the book, all the same, compress what I would otherwise have said in that article, compress it, and just throw it in the book. So that's what that is about. That's section 7.2. Excuse me. Maybe I'll be able to edit this out of the video. I hope so. The next section is 7.3. No, I beg your pardon. 7.21, which is again a subsection of 7.2, and I've titled it "Not a Lone Star." What I did here was to argue that because from conversations you hear people think that, oh, we just need this person to come to power and solve all of our problems. Usually people are wanting a dictator, a benevolent dictator. There's no such thing. So all dictators are malevolent. So not a lone star. No one person can resolve Nigeria's mess. Nigeria is a deep mess. Nigeria is in a lot of mess. And Nigeria is a country that has a lot of challenges, you know, and as a result of the steep challenges that we have, I believe very strongly that all of the problems that we've got in the country cannot be resolved by an individual, can't be resolved by a superhero, that it's going to require the concerted effort of the best the country's got. That's the argument that I put forth there. In order for me to have a balanced presentation in that section, I discussed the examples of countries where lone stars have managed to bring immense success to their country. I used the classic example, or the classical example, of Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, who is unarguably the lone star of the Singaporean success story. And Paul Kagame so far has shown himself to be the lone star of the Rwandan story. Paul Kagame seemed to be following in the footsteps of Lee Kuan Yew, seemed to be, I don't know if he's borrowed out of the playbook of Lee Kuan Yew, but he seemed to be replicating what the man did, what Lee Kuan Yew did. But because the Rwandan story is still an ongoing story, we can't exactly conclude yet. But thus far, Paul Kagame is the lone star of the Rwandan story thus far. Time it remains to be seen if they will be able to, be able to put Rwanda right in the center of the world like Lee Kuan Yew did. Rwanda is still a low-income country. Let's see if Kagame will be able to make it exceedingly rich like Lee Kuan Yew did with Singapore. Another reason I posited that a lone star couldn't solve Nigeria's problem, one of the reason that I gave, the core reason for me is our sheer number. You know, there are 200 million of us, we're told. Yeah, I like to use the modest figure of 120 million, which is still quite large. Singapore is only 5 million and Rwanda is 12 million. It's much easier for a lone star to manage and direct affairs of, below 20 million population. I don't think it's possible with a population of over 100 million. I just don't think so. So that's the core gist of 7.2 and not a lone star. In 7.3, which is titled America's Model of Democracy, the dangers of absolute freedom. America is an interesting phenomenon. Um, America has this long history of um, regime change, intervention. The United States likes to interfere, intervene in the affairs of other countries. It does this for diverse reasons, but um, what it pretends to do, or the idea that it tells the world that it does this for the sake of democracy, that it needs to superimpose its style of democracy on countries all over the world. And that for me it's just a tad too much. It's okay for countries like humans to lend support to one another, but when one country begins to go in to topple democratically elected president, that's too much. And what makes it really worrisome is the style or the type of democracy that America continually pushes, which is this one that has a feature of absolute freedom. You know, the where you sell to people that they can do just about anything that they want to do. Because absolute freedom means no standard, no rules, and that's what America pushes. Absolute freedom, that people must be free to do whatever the heck it is that they like. But no one really can live like that unless you're in the wild. You cannot be in a civil society, in a civil environment, and think it's okay for you to do whatever it is that you like. So that's what I argued in that section, essentially. If you think about it, really, there's no such thing as absolute freedom. And then another thing about American style democracy that I personally push back on, that I totally disagree with, is this concept of individualism, which is quite distinct from individuality. Because individuality and community are like 5 and 6, are like 5 and 6, like the gloves and the hand. You can't have individuality without community, because after all, no one person dropped from the sky. Everybody was born in a family, and your family is a member of an extended family, a nuclear family. Many nuclear families then form a community, and then communities become societies. So individuality and community are mutually inclusive. You can't have one without the other. Individualism, on the other hand, says that I'm just this individual and I can do whatever the heck it is that I like at the expense of community. That I should be free to do whatever I like, even if I'm causing harm. That's what individualism is. And that's why it's quite distinct from individuality. Individuality respects community. Community supports individuality. That's the natural order of things. Individualism is an unnatural way to live, where you want to live for self only, where you want to live for self only, and you don't give a hoot about other people. Other people are community. Because the minute you hurt one person, even if it's just one person, because that person is a member of a community, you're hurting community. Maybe when we begin to see that there's this whole-scale interconnectivity in our universe, in the world that we live in, maybe we'll begin to treat ourselves better and treat the other life forms that we share our own planet with better. Moving on now to discuss 7.31, section 7.31, which I captioned Democracy, Capitalism, and Globalization. What I did here essentially was to show how the West, again, the United States, since the 1960s has been using globalization to push and export capitalism to all the nooks and crannies of the world, such that today capitalism is the dominant economic system. There is capitalism everywhere in the world, even here on the African continent. And the experts tell us every time that capitalism eradicates and eliminates poverty. If this is the case, why are there large swathes of impoverished people who live below the poverty line on the African continent and in other places like Asia? Why are there still poor people in the world? It can't be because they are all lazy. Because that's the foremost argument you hear from the proponents of capitalism. They tell you that people are poor because they are lazy. More than half of the world's population can't all be lazy. So that goes to show you that there's something wrong with capitalism. And there is a lot wrong with it, because capitalism hurts and harms our world. It harms we the people, and it also harms the environment. The foundation of capitalism is rooted in greed and exploitation of others. You don't have to take my word for it. You just do your own research, okay? But when you research, let me give out the caveat that you're not going to find, you're not likely, like if you Google now, you're not likely to find anything that will tell you that capitalism does hurt the world, okay? Excuse me. You're not going to find anything that says that. Like, in my own case, before I started to write my book, I believed capitalism was just commerce. But the further I dug, the more I read, the more I researched, and with the ability to connect dots, I realized, and I mean, my own lived experience with what I'd researched and the ability to connect dots made me conclude that capitalism is actually a very hurtful system, economic system. Capitalism doesn't mean market economy. It doesn't mean free market, because you can have those things without capitalism. But the way they present capitalism to us now is as if without capitalism we couldn't have a market economy, or we couldn't have a free market. So so like I said, you do your own investigation, do your own research, and then form your own opinions. So that's that about 7.31. Now 7.4, which I titled Proposing and Charting a New Nigeria, What and How. This is where I essentially unpacked everything that I had in my head and all of the ideas that I wanted to share on what we must do at this crucial point to salvage what is left of this country before it's too late. Chapter 7 actually has the highest number of pages in my book. You know, if you contrast all of the chapters, chapter 7 has the most number of pages. So I discussed what needs to be done and how to go about it. We have to do that which we haven't done before. If we want a different kind of result, you know, if we want a progressive, if we want progress and we want exponential result, then we've got to try something we haven't tried before. That's what I shared in 7.4. And then in 7.41, which I titled Charting a New Course, a Bottom-Up Approach, I argued that what we must do now has to be us laying a whole new foundation for Nigeria. Because if ever we had a foundation, that foundation is now become very weak. So we need to do away with it and build a whole new one. There are those who even opine that we never had a foundation, and I'm inclined to go that way with them, because even before the fledgling nation, you know, known as Nigeria, independent Nigeria, could have a study base, it was toppled by military coup in 1966. We became independent in 1960, and 6 years on, I mean, we were not settled into a new country before the military coup happened in 66, and then the counter coup came, and then, you know, so series of coups. So like I said, I'm more inclined to go with those who say that we don't even have a foundation, that Nigeria has no foundation. So whatever foundation there was, whatever foundation we had that our pre-independent or independent eras, our national eras were able to build, is definitely all crumbled now. So we need to lay a whole new foundation. And, you know, like I used in that section and throughout the length of my book, that nobody builds a house from the roof. You always build a house from the foundation. But from what I see, it looks to me like Nigerians seem to think that you can build a house from the roof, which is why we continue to, you know, queue up behind recycled individuals who continue to put themselves up for election, and we continue to queue up behind them. That's very lame and a very unintelligent thing to be doing in the 21st century. It's another election cycle, and you have people rooting for candidates on the basis of, well, they have their own reasons for rooting for this candidate. You can't be queuing up behind individuals who have continually raped and pillaged resources of your country, who basically, you know, Nigeria is an oligarchic state. Let's stop deceiving ourselves and by saying that we have a democracy. We don't. And this recycled element, I mean, it's another election cycle, and people are queuing up behind this kleptocratic element, you know? We all can't be that stupid, right? We've got to, you know, brace ourselves up and do that which we've never done before. We've got to be brave. We've got to be brave. We've got to be courageous. Do what needs to be done, which is to, you know, a total turnaround from what we've been used to. For as long as we continue to queue up behind this kleptocratic, oligarchic element, we would never get beyond incremental progress. And the interesting thing is, we take the way it seems now is we take one step forward and then we take 10 steps backwards. If we want the opposite of incremental progress, which is exponential development, growth, and progress, then we must do what we haven't done before. We must cease queuing up behind these individuals and locate real leaders, you know, individuals who have the competence to lead, who have the requisite competence for leadership. We must locate these individuals, rally around them, support them, and give them the opportunity to lead us. It's not going to come easy, but if you think about it, it's the only thing we've got to do to save ourselves at this point. And this brings me to the end of this series where I've been discussing the content of my book. One thing you can do to help the channel grow is to like the content, share it, leave us a comment, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to hit the notification button when you do that, so that every time that we upload something new, you'll be notified. And of course, what I expect you to do now, especially if you found the series interesting and you've learned something new, is to actually make a purchase from my book. That's the whole point of doing this series in the first place. And the links to where you can make a purchase of both the print and the e-copy are in the description box below. Until I come your way next time, it's Yetunde Olokun saying, Ireo.